was a coal miner. By the time I did my training, which involved going obviously into the coal mine, we went down the pit every other day. That was how they did it. Every other day, once we started our training, we went down the pit every other day. And we had a group of, well, really, kids, you know, being trained for a future in the coal mines. And we went to different coal mines, some much bigger than the Robin Hood pit. It's all a long time ago now, so I can't give you the names. But we went to other pits. My best pal during that time was Eric. After I left the pit and went into the army at 15 and a half, which of course you're not allowed to do now, I don't think, I signed on and was a boy soldier, boy Flannery. And luckily I went into an infantry unit, which was actually the famous Thin Red Line. The Thin Red Line, the original, even though America took that to their heart, the idea of the Thin Red Line. But the Thin Red Line was actually the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. And I joined the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders as a boy soldier. And I went to my first place of being in the Highlanders was, first of all, in Stirling Castle. So my parents put me on, I'm meandering around here, but then I'm walking. My parents put me on the train, I think at Exchange Station, an old big steam locomotive, and I was transported. Never really travelled anywhere in my life before, and only 15, and I never realised at the time what an emotional thing that was when my parents waved goodbye to me. Of course, when you're a kid you don't think outside of your own sphere, do you? Or how other people may be feeling. So I was oblivious of that, just thought about the adventure that I had ahead of me. I went to Stirling Castle, and then after I went to Stirling Castle, I spent very little time there, and I went as soon as there was a platoon, a unit that was going out that had completed their training. They linked me up with them, and I went to Germany. And I was actually in Germany, in Berlin. The Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders were part of the British contingent that was in Berlin. And I went to Berlin, and I was there on my 16th birthday. Imagine that, couldn't happen now, could it? Kid of 16 joining the army and going off to another country. But anyway, I went there, and while I was there, that was an exciting time for me. We actually were in a barracks. We were in a barracks that was close to the Russian sector. In fact, in the barracks that I was in these army barracks, they have different units. They did have different blocks. And we were in the last but one block before the Russian zone. In fact, a couple of misguided men actually defected to the Russians, and all they had to do was walk down the road and they would be in the Russian sector, very heavily guarded of course. And there was one building, the last unit was in what we called no man's land. Neither Russia nor the British occupied that building, it was empty. So that we were in the band block was there, and the pipe band were there, and the military band were there. I was in the military band. So I spent that time, a little time, not too much. I had some lessons from fine musicians from the Berlin Philharmonic, which I didn't quite appreciate at the time, but I was learning to play the trombone and doing quite well. And I went from there and I went to Aberdeen, eventually to Aberdeen, and I was there in the boys' school at Aberdeen with, I think it was the Seaforth Highlanders. Later I transferred out of those, and I ended up for the last 2 years, nearly 2 years of my service in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Nothing to do with me being engineer. I was a musician. So I think that's enough meandering. Probably more than one video. Beth will probably split it into a talk about the army. I didn't like the army. The army didn't like me. I found out, after signing on, I found out that at 15 and a half I'd signed on for 6 years, which the recruiting sergeant assured me was all I could sign on for. Well, he wouldn't he? He wouldn't tell me 3. I think I was on the very last part of the National Service call-up, because I remember in the band that I later ended up in, there were national servicemen, people who were forced to serve the country by giving 2 years of their time to the military. And I did have the best of my service in the army was in the engineers and the engineers staff band in Arborfield in Reading, and that was a good time for me, because I made friends in the town of Reading. I made friends. I played in a little jazz club called the Latin Quarter, if I remember rightly, and I played there with my friends Pat Kelly. Pat Kelly was another trombone player, and we did a quirky little band, 2 trombones, and other people who wanted to perhaps sit in. And Dave Price was the piano player. Gosh, I'm testing my memory now for names. But I had some fun times there, and then finally got out. And I went on a summer season, meaning I joined a band that was made up of people by personal recommendation, and cobbled together under a man called George Slater, and it was called George Slater and the Crackerjacks, and we did comedy and playing and all kinds of other stuff to entertain in Great Yarmouth. So I went into the first few months of my freedom from the army was on the seaside town of Great Yarmouth. It wasn't the Riviera. Now, I'm hearing some sounds. Don't know what we're going to do with red I think I can hear a truck approaching, which will possibly be James, who's promised to pick me up. Now, Red, you need to go home. Okay? You need to go home now. Go on. Go home. Go home. Come on, my friend, go home. Look at you. You need to go home. I don't speak dog. I can't tell you any better than that. You need to go home. Go on. Go home. Go on now. Go on. Go home. You go. Go. No. Well, he will go home eventually, and he'll find his way home. I'm sorry, I'm looking down at my feet because this is the red hill where the clay is almost red and can be tricky. Red, you got to go home. You have to go home. Yes, I love you too, but you got to go home. You big old thing. Go on. You should have gone home before. Yeah, so after Great Yarmouth, I went to London, met up with an old army buddy, Bob Brooks. Bob had been in the last band that I was in the REME, Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, as I explained, in Reading, and he had gone into computers. He did very well. So from there I went and I joined the Bertram Mills circus band, and I did, wow, I think it was a long season at the Olympia. The Olympia was a very big centre, convention centre, I guess, and that was in London, near, if not part of, Earls Court, which is where a lot of Aussies used to go and live, in Earls Court. And I lived in Earls Court. Phil Beach Gardens. I have one guy, a subscriber, who likes to look these things up. I lived in Phil Beach Gardens, and I lived there with my friend Bob Brooks until I moved to another part of town. And after working with the Bertram Mills Circus, which actually I really loved that life, and I was very close to joining that circus because I got to know the clowns. Now, since that was when clowns were beloved, but since that time, I think that the movies have kind of ruined it on the clowns being loved by kids, and now they've made these satanic clowns, and you have the Joker, who was made up like a clown and was extremely evil. So now they're not viewed in the same way, but back then they were beloved in the 60s, and I considered going on tour with the Bertram Mills Circus. I was never offered a job officially, but my friend who was in the band said if I really wanted, I could go with the band, because I was already a member. They asked me to go with them in the band as a trombone player. But what I would have liked to have done would be to have learned to be a clown. And I thought very seriously about it and really wanted to do that. I don't know, these things happen, don't they? And you come to a place where you could take one turn or the other, and who knows why you take the turn that you did, but I didn't go, and that was the start of another period of my life where I worked in the nightclubs in London. So I'll end off here now. Thanks for being with me and listening to me wander through my my memories, and bye for now.